She healed their children, fed their hungry, fixed what was broken, and they paid her back in blood. This is a story about how a town curses itself. Thanks for joining us tonight for The Witch in the Woods. So sit back and snuggle up. It's story time. Now, I'm not one to go repeating every piece of gossip I ever heard, but this one, whew, I heard it from my grandma's own lips when I was just a little thing, and she swore to its truthfulness on her best cast iron skillet. It happened years and years ago in a town just down the way, a place that don't show up on the maps anymore. It's about Miss Edna. Grandma said she was older than the town itself. Nobody knew just how old, but her knees creaked like a church pew, and her hair had long since gone silver gray, braided back in a rope that nearly touched her waist. She lived in a cabin just past the rise where the woods got thick, the trees too close together, like they were leaning in to listen. And you didn't go there unless you needed something. And if you did need something, well, Edna always knew before you knocked. Got a sick baby? Edna had a salve. Husband drinking too hard and hitting too fast, and had a root for that. Lost your job and needed a little luck or a new door to open. Edna's soup could turn things around in 3 days flat. Not all her miracles were loud. Most were just quiet kindness, tied up in twine and handed off with a nod. Edna had a remedy for everything. Just ask the old Bennett boy. Jack was 10 years old at the time and hadn't slept a full night since he could talk. Nightmares had their hooks in him, something fierce. Made him scream like he was being dragged to hell itself. His mama came from Edna's with a cloth doll filled with dried lavender and whispers stitched into the seams. She tucked it under his pillow, and that child slept 12 hours straight, drooling like a puppy and smiling in his dreams. Or Miss Delia from over by the mill pond. Her garden hadn't given up a crop in 5 years, no matter how hard she prayed. Edna gave her a pinch of powdered something or other in a paper twist and told her to bury it under her scarecrow and sing while she did it. That summer she couldn't walk to the chicken coop without tripping over squash and green beans. She never charged, just handed you a jar or a pouch, sometimes a cord-wrapped bundle of dried plants that smelled like earth and fire, and said, "Remember what you asked for. You don't get to take it back." And she meant it. You know, Miss Edna could sometimes even help you if you didn't know how to ask. Like the 2 little girls who lived down near the cotton line, just on the edge of the trees. Folks say they used to whisper about the lady in the woods, daring each other to get just a little bit closer, but never quite brave enough to knock. They didn't go to church, those girls. Daddy wouldn't allow it, and Mama kept quiet with a bruise blooming under her eye most Sundays. But one summer afternoon, hot enough to bake biscuits on your windowsill, those girls crept through the trees and found themselves just shy of Edna's cabin. They only meant to peek. The chimney puffed smoke like it was the dead of winter. One girl laughed and said, "Who needs a fire in this heat?" But Miss Edna always had a fire burning, no matter the season. When they tiptoed to the window, they saw Edna look up from her hearth and motion for them to come inside. And inside, oh Lord, it was like walking into autumn. The air was crisp, cool, and still. The smell of rosemary and lemon balm danced on the breeze from the window fan. Edna sat them down without a word and handed them 2 thick slices of cornbread and glasses of cold buttermilk. They were skin and bones, those girls, hungry in a way no child ought to be. "Food is more than just filling your belly," Edna told them, smoothing the youngest's hair. "This here will feed your soul." They ate it like it was their first real meal in weeks, and it just might have been. When they walked home that night, bellies full and hands still warm from holding Edna's, they found a woman waiting on the porch with a clipboard and badge. Someone had made a call, filed a complaint. The parents were taken in, and the girls placed in the home of a couple who had long since stopped hoping for children. The wife, Well, she'd visited Edna too, but years back. Said she'd prayed and prayed for a daughter, and now, well, Miss Edna had given her two. One of the townsfolk found out her warning the hard way. Catherine. She came to Edna crying over her husband's boss, saying he was a drunk and he didn't deserve to be in charge. She was his secretary and said that he was drunk at all hours of the day. But what she really wanted was for her husband to get promoted. And he did. The boss didn't get fired, though. He got himself a better paying job where his parents lived. They were getting older, and this made it so much easier for him to take care of them proper-like. And Catherine's husband took his place. But he was a fool with a temper and couldn't run a feed store, let alone a business. The company folded within months, and everyone lost their jobs, including Catherine and her man. Catherine and her husband was the only ones that couldn't seem to find work afterwards, though. When Catherine came back to Edna, just begging for help, Edna looked at her dead in the eye and said, "Remember what you asked for. You don't get to take it back." Catherine left with nothing. She didn't let it go, her hatred turning her insides into a roiling mess of snakes. Years later, the preacher got caught up in a brothel sting 3 counties over, and word spread fast. He'd been arrested with 2 working girls and a bottle of gin, pants around his ankles, and his Bible still in his coat pocket. But he swore up and down that it wasn't what it looked like, claimed he'd been ministering to the wayward. And wouldn't you know it, the arresting officer and the judge, both of them went to Dalton's church, and the charges vanished like smoke. But his name still had all the mud and shame on it. People were questioning the truth of his tale, wondering if he was the sort of God-fearing man they wanted in a preacher. And that's when old Catherine took her chance. She went to Reverend Dalton, tears in her eyes, saying she feared for his soul. Told him Edna had used her charms to trick them all, to take down a good man of God. She said she must have put a hex on him, said she was a witch, that Miss Edna couldn't abide the church and wanted to destroy it. And Reverend Dalton? He leaned right into it. He told his flock there was evil in their midst, that a dark spirit had seduced him, that he had been bewitched. And every Sunday, louder than the last, he named that spirit, Miss Edna. He riled them up one sermon at a time, told them the devil wore calico and brewed curses in chipped teapots, told them that to rid the town of sin, they'd need to root it out at the source. He said they had to take action. They had to protect their families. He told the folks who had ever used Edna's help that they were to blame too, that their desperation had opened the door to the devil, that by drinking her tea and whispering at her hearth, they had fed the serpent that led the church astray. He said they had to atone, to act, to pray and fast until God told them what to do. But not everyone turned their back. That family, the one who had taken in the 2 little girls Edna had helped, they stood up in church and called her a saint. The wife said, voice quivering but strong, said that Edna had saved those children, that their lives were better because of her, that God himself must have sent Miss Edna to them. And folks turned on her like a pack of dogs. Said she was bewitched too. Said she was unfit to raise children, that if she would defend a witch, she couldn't be trusted to raise good Christian girls. Within a week, they were run clean out of town. Had to pack up in the night, leave behind the house they'd only just finished painting. Left tire tracks in the dust and silence behind them. After that, no one else dared speak on Edna's behalf. Now even the other folks she'd helped turned cold. The mama whose son got cured of the wasting fever stopped waving. The man whose job she'd saved crossed the street to avoid her eyes. The church ladies gossiped like crows on a fence, whispering, "Witch," with their Bibles open. And one man, one she'd helped in more ways than most, claimed he'd prayed with the Reverend Dalton and knew now what had to be done. that he would be God's righteous hammer. Edna didn't defend herself. She didn't storm the church, and she didn't explain a thing. But her fire still burned in that little house of hers. Jack, a man she'd helped before, went up there asking for help once again. Said the boyfriend his daughter had run off from was back in town. Said he didn't know what else to do. And so Edna let him in. Fire crackling, kettle hissing, herbs hanging dry above the mantel. She offered him tea without asking what for. She already knew. Set him down and poured it into her favorite cup, the one with the little bluebirds on it she called her cup of happiness. He wouldn't touch it. She sat with him, calm and quiet, and asked if he would just take a sip. Said it would make him right as rain. He wouldn't. He said he just wanted her to stop making him feel this way, to stop knowing things she had no right to know. She looked at him hard and asked again, "Are you sure this is what you want?" He looked away. She said softer, "You don't get to take it back. And wishing harm on the innocent don't go unanswered." She stood up to fetch something stronger from the shelf. He stood too. He knocked her beloved cup from her hand, and it shattered on the earth. That's when he reached for a cast iron skillet. Still had the remnants of her last meal in it. He swung it with righteous anger as she watched him with weary eyes. They say he beat her until the blood ran into the cracks of that old stone hearth and mixed in with the ashes. Then he walked to the sheriff's office, hands still shaken, and confessed the whole twisted truth. He thought he was being the town's hero, but the jail cell door closed on him just as tight. And those night terrors from back when he was little came right back, harder and meaner than ever. The town didn't mourn. They didn't so much as hold a service for her. They whispered and speculated and nodded when Reverend Dalton said justice had been served. The gravedigger said only one person even came to the funeral, but he never said who it was. They tried to sell her house. No one would buy it. They tried to clear her garden. Everything grew back twice as thick. Some said they saw smoke rising from the chimney, even when it shouldn't have been lit. Said they thought they saw furniture moved, and that the ashes were always fresh. And folks thought karma wouldn't come knocking, but it did. The woman who gossiped loudest about Edna, Bertha Plum, always had something to say. Well, she woke up one morning without her voice. It was just gone, like it had been bottled and buried in Edna's garden. The hardware store owner who called her a fraud, even though she was the one that had helped him when his poor mama got ill. His house sank straight into the earth. A sinkhole swallowed it up like a bite of cornbread, walls, porch, swing, and all. No one would rebuild on that land, said the soil wept after. Gardens withered, every yard but Miss Edna's. One dog, a mean old hound named Brisket, refused to go anywhere near her property after the murder, planted his haunches on the road and growled like death itself lived in those weeds. Even after Edna was gone, he wouldn't cross that patch of earth. He knew better. The town had already begun to rot from the inside out. Kids talking back, fights in the schoolyard, the bakery burned down. The sheriff's wife ran off with the pastor's daughter. A thick fog settled on the road that never lifted. Crops dried up, marriages ended. The lights in the church flickered and bulbs burst during sermons. Folks stopped trusting each other. The town council dissolved after 3 fistfights in one meeting. Then the land itself seemed to turn against them. Dogs started barking, but only at night, and only in the direction of Edna's house. Chickens laid blood-speckled eggs. The water from the pump smelled like pennies and rot. Mail went missing, keys turned up twisted in locks, and one poor soul found her wedding ring inside a dead cow. Folks said the wind had a taste to it, bitter. And the more Dalton hollered about salvation, the more the walls of that church seemed to close in on him. The church pews emptied. The Reverend's voice got hoarse, his sermons louder and more desperate, echoed through a half-empty chapel. The town turned into a husk of itself, people moving out and moving on. Now, how can a town so prosperous just go to plumb pot so quick? Well, Grandma had a good idea on just how it all came to be. See, she knew the gravedigger and his wife, a fella named Hank. Edna had helped him and his wife after years of trying to have a baby, gave them a tea and a prayer, and the next spring they had a boy with Edna's eyes. His boy was 31 now, with a happy family of his own. Hank told his wife the full story about laying Edna's sweet soul to rest. So, of course, his wife had to tell my grandma. Hank said he saw her, the stranger. After the burial, he walked up to her with tears in his eyes, said he was sorry for her loss, said the town would never be the same again. The woman quickly agreed, voice sharp and shrill like a wind blowing through broken glass. She wore her long black hair twisted into a tight bun, skin pale as riverstone, ice blue eyes that didn't seem to blink. No tears in them, no softness. Hank said he didn't see grief in those eyes, he saw raw red rage. Seemed Edna had a sister. Only this one don't ask what you need. She gives you exactly what you deserve. Now, folks, that preacher, he left town one night, disappeared into thin air. Nobody bothered to look for him. But now, folks going out to the old township say you can still hear his voice sometimes, begging for Edna's help if the wind's just right. And they swear Edna's fire still burns. So if Miss Edna's fire still burns in your mind, light up that like button, whisper a comment her way, and share this tale with someone who needs to remember. Be careful what you ask for. And don't forget to subscribe, because stories like this, they never really end.